Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. A little while back, I uploaded my review of Eastern Nordics and mentioned near the end that I was going through the process of farming stat elixirs to make my playthrough of Nightmare difficulty a joke because that's fun to me. However, I couldn't find any real solid guides online at the time that dealt with the most efficient way of doing this. True, it's not as simple as grinding out aura plants like it was in Ys 8, but I think it's not as bad as people originally thought. There are a couple different methods I tested out just to see how many elixirs I could get in about an hour, but to be more accurate, I should say how many resources I could gain in an hour that I could use to either outright purchase or craft elixirs. Also, rather than just doing a couple runs for a minute or two and then extrapolating out to an hour, I used actual results from testing these out so you can see practical numbers for how this works. For those who don't want to sit through the full explanation of this, I'll have a timestamp you can skip to in order to get the final results. The bulk of this video is showing how I came to those conclusions. Also, this will have spoilers for the end of the game, including the final boss, since I will be showcasing what it looks like to finish farming stat items and confronting the final boss on Inferno. So, either click and drag to the timestamp, or click the chapter heading and go to it that way. For the rest of you who want this more in depth, let's get started. There are a couple of prerequisites for doing this. The first is being in the final chapter of the game and having access to the final dungeon, specifically all the way up to the door of the final boss. This is where most of our farming is going to take place. Secondly, all of this started after I hit level 99. Most likely you're not at level 99 by the time you get to the final boss, but probably somewhere in the early to mid 80s. The final boss is level 85, so that's a pretty good range. The good thing is, the same method we'll be using to farm items here can be used to farm XP and level up to 99 pretty quickly. Just equip the accessories that convert crystal shards and gold to XP. Those would be the Saint's Medal and the Fighter's Medal respectively, and from what I can tell, the effects do stack. I tested this with the other conversion items and that was definitely the case, so I have no reason to assume they weren't stacking with XP as well. Both of these can be crafted by Mandy and the Sandras for 51 beast parts, 34 craft stock, and either 2 blue sea stones or red sea stones respectively. So, not very expensive, and they make a difference. The other item we'll be using is the Ebon Mask, also made by Mandy, which costs 263 beast parts, 175 craft stock, 3 everlasting leather, and 5 dark lumps apiece. While we're at it, there are some other items we'll want as well for our actual Nightmare/Inferno run. Those would be the Chevalier Gloves and the Sirius Ring. The gloves cost 200 beast parts, 133 craft stock, 2 everlasting leather, and 2 blue sea stones, while the Sirius Ring will require 351 beast parts, 234 craft stock, 3 everlasting leather, and 3 red sea stones. None of these take very long to gather, but if you want the totals to craft all of these for each character, assuming you have none of them, which you should have at least some of these if you've done all the quests and fully explored everywhere, that would be 1,832 beast parts, 1,836 craft stock, 19 everlasting leather, 10 dark lump, 8 blue sea stones, and 10 red sea stones. The only grindy part of that would be the craft stock and beast parts, but there's actually a really easy way of getting these, and assuming you haven't been bartering beast parts or craft stock for anything, you're probably already maxed out on these. If you want to go ahead and grab the items that convert stuff to either shards or gold, you can nab those from INR for 85 points apiece, which is pretty easy to rack up by just selling useless crap. The items you'll want to convert gold and XP to shards are the Mason's Medal and the Hermit's Medal, and the only item he sells that converts to gold is the Sorcerer's Medal. The other medal, the Tycoon's Medal, is actually purchased from Thrud's Barge for 8,500 gold. Now that we have all of the gear prerequisites out of the way, assuming of course that you've maxed out both Adol and Karja's ultimate weapon and armor, equip the Ebon Mask, the medals you want to use either for gold, XP, or shards, and then the Hero Cloak as well. These are easy to buy from somewhere, I'm too lazy to look it up right now, and give yourself a boost to strength and defense. Our main source of farming is going to be this platform here. Teleport to Faarlundheim midpoint 2 and work your way up to the large circular platform. There are quite a few enemies in this spot, and we're going to be using Ragna Disaster as our primary form of attack. The higher you end up getting your shrink stat, the faster this will go, but even at this point, you should be making quick work of most enemies here. Now before I forget, to speed this up, drop the difficulty down to easy. This does absolutely nothing for how much you gain through XP, shards, or gold. I tested this out on a few difficulty settings and was getting the same results regardless. What changes is how much damage you take and how much HP the enemies have. Easy, just drops this down to make the farming go by faster. If you're not at level 99 yet, just start converting everything to XP, and I'd say you can hit 99 in easily less than an hour. I don't even think it took me half an hour to finish hitting max level. Once you're done with that, it's time to start dealing with the actual farming process for elixirs. Oh, I should add, the fastest way to reset everything is just to save and reload instead of going back to a waypoint. You can do about 2 runs per minute once you become efficient. I'll leave a video up showing the 2 places I tend to use Ragna Disaster because if placed correctly, you can typically wipe out all enemies in just 2 spins of this thing. Spinning in circles and mowing down enemies is always fun. Just as a quick note, as mentioned earlier, all of these numbers are from actual runs I did, and RNG always plays a part, but my runs are fairly consistent and didn't deviate too much from one another. Some of that can also be attributed to becoming more efficient and slowly increasing stats over time. Your mileage may vary, but it should give you a rough idea of how this works. First, let me break down exactly what I tested here. There are 2 primary methods I tried for farming. One of them involves the Seabed Temple depths, and the other is grinding out the Faarlundheim Midpoint 2 platform. The Faarlundheim platform is by far the most lucrative, but for those who are curious about why you might want to use the Seabed Temple, let me show you. The method here consists of teleporting to the depths waypoint and then breaking the nearby objects and then dropping down to destroy the other breakables. The most you'll get out of this by far is basic craft stock materials, and you can hit max capacity on those in less than 10 minutes. However, there are other objects you'll be collecting at the same time. Those items are black silver sand, soul timber, Aran mushroom, aurora berries, red herbs, and dryad tears. Once you hit max capacity on your craft stock, you'll teleport to Karnak and then barter with Momina for Schneeblachen,
bless you,
for 47 apiece. The money you get from selling these off is enough to buy at least 1 elixir. Of course, while you're here, you can sell off the rest of the items you collect for money to buy elixirs with. In testing this out for an hour, this is how much I was able to collect. I'm just going to display everything on screen here so you can see the number of items I collected rather than reading them all off as well as their sale value, so feel free to pause the video and look at them. Items cap at 999, so you can see that the amount of soul timber exceeds capacity, which is why you need to at least be selling that off each run. Ultimately, with the amount I sold, I earned enough to buy 23 elixirs at 276,000 gold per elixir from Annika's goods. Not terrible for such a low effort method of grinding materials, but as you'll see, this pales in comparison to what we're about to start doing. Well, there's one more thing we need to discuss. Stat caps. That's right, Ys 10 actually puts a cap on how high you can raise your stats. Difficulty does not change this at all since it held true on Inferno as well. After hitting my caps, I unequipped all of Adol and Karja's gear and emptied their release lines. Adol has the following stat caps: Strength 557, Defense 557, Vitality 563, Luck 560, Break 563. For Karja, her caps are as follows: Strength 547, Defense 546, Vitality 572, Luck 570, Break 573. Once you start farming, you should be able to look at these numbers and calculate how many of each elixir you need so you don't end up wasting resources. Faarlundheim is a much better source of farming for a number of reasons, primarily the number of high-value items you can sell and reagents necessary for crafting elixirs. The items are as follows: Steely Bones, Vajra Bones, Red Lumps, Yellow Lumps, Dark Lumps, Rainbow Lumps, Red Sea Stones, Blue Sea Stones, Yellow Sea Stones, and Dark Sea Stones. You'll also be maxing out your basic beast parts and basic ingredients by the end of each run so they can be used for bartering if needed. More on that later. As I mentioned before, elixirs cost 276,000 gold apiece. If you barter for them using crystal shards, they're 92,000 shards each. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the only elixir recipes you ever find are Strength, Defense, Luck, and Break. I've completed every side quest, S-ranked every recapture event, and hit max affinity with everyone. The only thing I didn't 100% on my first run was beating it on Nightmare. And that said, from what I can tell, the only way to get Vitality elixirs is to either buy them or barter them from Annika. Also, the only elixirs I recommend crafting are Strength and Luck. And that's because even though you get a lot of blue and dark seastone drops during these runs for crafting each of these, the one thing you don't get any of from enemies are crystallucent coral. Schneeblocken.
Bless you.
And then basic ingredients are something else you'll need to contend with, and you can either buy these outright or barter for them. Basic reagents are far more expensive, so I recommend bartering for them whenever possible and buying the other ingredient outright. Schneeblocken,
bless you,
are 6,075 apiece, and basic reagents cost 2,500 apiece for a group of 50 or 15,000 for a set of 300. However, you'll be needing a lot more of these than you do the other, so capping at 9,999 each time will run you almost 500k each time. After crafting, you usually have 249 basic reagents left over, so you'll need to buy 195 batches of 50. It's the same unit price as the larger one, which costs 487,500 gold. It's not unreasonable to expect to spend over 1 million gold on these during the crafting process, whereas bartering will get you at least 2 full batches of 9,999 reagents and save you a bundle. By the time you use up all the ones you gain from bartering, you shouldn't need to buy many more out of your own coffers. So with all that out of the way, what's the best way to do all of this? Well, starting out, I'm actually going to recommend you not focus primarily on elixirs, but on creating Abiding Love plus seeds for your release lines. After each run, craft as many of these as you can. Each character has 65 nodes on their lines, and once you hit 99, you can unlock all nodes to take level 3 seeds no matter which depth. I was consistently getting between 260 and 280 rainbow lumps each run. It takes 3 Abiding Loves to craft 1 Abiding Love plus seed. That's 20 rainbow lumps for 1 Abiding Love plus, which means that you can probably craft between 13 to 14 of these after each run. The best part of this is that it gives you bonuses to each of the red, blue, and yellow categories, which means upgrading all of those stats and your substats by 2. Also, by the time you get to the end of the release lines, you'll have about 130 extra points to each stat, and your substats will probably have hit cap as well. The sheer amount of bonuses you get from this as well, such as SP cost reduction, restoring SP points, restoring HP from dealing damage, increased damage dealt, mitigation, etc., is invaluable. I mentioned in my review that I wasn't sure if doing a full Tree of Dark versus all Rainbow would be worth it, and I can say that I absolutely see no reason to ever do this any other way for reasons I will show you at the end of the video. You'll also likely have a few Limitless Courage seeds from buried treasures, or you could have enough to make some Limitless Courage plus seeds, but I wouldn't bother trying to farm for these. The exchange rate is abysmal, and converting lumps to seastones and then seastones to the plus versions is something like a 60-to-1 ratio. In order to do that, you would need to farm, I think, somewhere around 7,800 rainbow lumps, which, if you're lucky, would only take you around 30 hours of farming, so have fun with that. In comparison, you'd only be able to craft 3 to 4 of those after a run with this, but you also lose 1 of each colored seastone in the process, since refining rainbow seastones requires 1 of each, so the plus 2 rainbow seeds are more than sufficient. I would craft all of those separately, instead of selling them along with everything else after a run, and I'll have numbers for each scenario should you decide to sell those or not. Anyway, let's see what we get if we just go with converting everything to gold and buying our elixirs outright, with no crafting involved. This is what I got after doing a run with each character equipped with Sorcerer's Medals and Tycoon Medals. Again, feel free to pause to see the totals and sale values for each individual item. Beast parts and basic ingredients could be bartered around for shards and crafting stock, which allowed me to buy 2 more elixirs on top of what I could sell. If I had chosen not to sell rainbow lumps, I could have purchased up to 55 elixirs, or in this case of selling off rainbow items, I could buy 57 elixirs. So just doing this, I could gain more than double what we saw in the Seabed method. All that after only an hour. However, this isn't taking into account that we have a lot of lumps that can be used to convert to seastones. Seastones, as you can see, sell for a bit more than lumps, so let's try to get as much high value items to sell as possible. So what happens if we decide to barter for all of our shards and convert everything? Well, if we convert everything we got from our run, we end up with an additional 87 rainbow seastones, 98 red seastones, 179 yellow seastones, and 65 dark seastones. However, it cost me 292,500 gold to do this. That's not bad considering that our sell value for the items more than compensates for our expenses. After subtracting the lumps we used and adjusting for how rainbow shards actually subtract from our other seastones, we have our new total sale value, which gives us 57 elixirs. With all that extra work, we only ended up with the exact same total we had in our original scenario, where we sold everything. That's because for each rainbow seastone we craft, we actually lose 9,375 gold in sales from the seastones we can no longer sell. So instead of it actually gaining 15,625 gold for each rainbow, factoring in the cost to make them, we're really only coming out ahead 6,250 per seastone. To test this, what if we only converted everything else and left the rainbow lumps as they were? Well, doing this, we end up with being able to purchase one more elixir, bringing the total to 58. So, is converting all of your lumps to seastones worth it? I mean, one elixir is one elixir, but it's not a huge difference. Again, for every one you convert, you're losing a few lumps you can't sell now, which doesn't really make too much of a difference in the long run. Having established that, let's see what happens when we convert everything to shards instead. In this case, we're going to keep our gear the same, but we're going to swap out our metals for the Hermit's metal and Mason's metal in each character. This assumes we're going to be doing some crafting with these shards instead of just bartering for them. And with all of that, let's see what sort of run I was able to achieve. In this run, if I just wanted to barter for elixirs with shards, I could purchase 17 elixirs with just the shards, and if I wanted to sell everything and buy the rest, that would get me another 39, which would be a total of 56. With what we can barter, that would be another 2 elixirs for a total of 58. That puts us roughly in line with where our previous run was with just using gold. Of course, this is assuming you sell all the rainbow items as well, and without that, it drops to 55. If we convert all our lumps into seastones, excluding rainbow, our elixir count, depending on whether we sell rainbow lumps or not, goes to between 60 to 63. But we can do better. Remember, we're getting a lot of crafting materials here, so let's put those to good use. Now, we have to keep in mind how many elixirs we can craft based on the number of shards. Each elixir costs 42,500 shards to produce, so with what we earned, we're really limited to only being able to craft 37 elixirs, which is pretty good actually. The formula for each elixir remains constant as well. They each require 750 basic reagents, 3 Schneeblocken, and 5 of whatever color seastone is required. You'll recall that I said we're only going to be crafting strength and luck potions, right? Well, that's because while we have plenty of seastones for either break or defense, dark and blue respectively, it's way too much of a pain to farm crystallucent corals in any meaningful way, whereas the other 2 recipes call for Vajra bones, which we'll have in abundance. Vitality can't be crafted either as far as I know, so only 2 of these can be crafted efficiently. So, assuming that's what we're doing, we still need to buy the other ingredients since reagents don't drop from this method, and neither does the other one. First thing we're going to do is calculate what we need as far as seastones are concerned. 37 elixirs require a total of 185 seastones. Now let's see what happens when we don't do any conversions from lumps and just craft what's available. We don't actually have enough red seastones to craft strictly strength elixirs, so we'll need to craft luck elixirs as well, and vice versa. I ran the numbers on both scenarios, depending on which one we wanted to prioritize, and the end result is ultimately the same. Looking at the scenario here, where we prioritize strength over luck, after subtracting out the materials used and the cost of buying reagents still required after bartering and buying the other one from Omina, we have 2 possible results. Should we decide not to sell any of our rainbow lumps for purposes of mana seeds later, we still have enough to purchase an additional 28 elixirs. If we sell, then that bumps up an additional 2. Now, if we take the crafted elixirs and add these together, we can have a total of either 65 or 67 elixirs. Now that's all good and well, the only problem is that those elixirs are split between 2 stat values, and I'd much prefer to have all of them going towards one single stat, rather than, in this case, 66 points into strength and 45 into luck. Still not terrible, but I like focusing on one stat at a time. Now, what happens if we convert all of our lumps and then do our crafting? Again, this is all excluding rainbow items in the conversion because, as we've seen, that doesn't help us out as much as we might like, unless we're torturing ourselves by going for the +3 stat seeds. Again, the end result as far as sale value ends up the same regardless of which stat we prioritize, but let's look at this one where, once more, I crafted all strength elixirs. I can craft fewer elixirs because of the conversion, so instead of 37, I can only make 34. However, this is well worth the trade-off. Once again, after accounting for materials used, you'll also notice that I didn't need to spend as much on reagents or Schneeblocken. In fact, there's savings here of 161,175, which is right at 61% of an elixir if you round up to 2 decimal places. Not too bad. But let's see what else happens here. With all the extra seastones, my purchase power has increased a bit more. Now, after selling off everything, once I'm done, instead of an additional 28 or 30 elixirs, I can now buy an additional 32 or 34, which brings my total possible elixirs up to either 66 or 68, essentially a net gain of 1 more elixir. But now, all of those will go towards one single stat. That's between 198 to 204 points into either strength or luck. Now, if you wanted to really go overboard and try not to spend any money on reagents at all, you could go farm the Seabed for crafting stock, which can be bartered for basic reagents, and then go back and farm them again so you have 9,999 across all 4 categories: basic beast parts, basic ingredients, basic reagents, and basic crafting stock. Of course, this will add about 20 minutes at a minimum to how long this takes, since you'll have to be going back and forth to barter, sell your crap, and then start the loop again. Still, keep in mind you'll also be gaining other items to sell. In order to test this out, I did exactly that. These were my results from just selling the items I got from the Seabed Temple, which gave me enough money to buy 7 more elixirs. Bartering basic ingredients for shards would allow me to craft more elixirs, 2 more to be precise, but how do the numbers play out by doing this? Well, if I wanted to craft 2 more elixirs, then sell off the rest, without converting all of my lumps, I came out with a possible total of between 76 to 78 elixirs. But remember, without converting lumps, you end up splitting your stat points instead of dumping them into 1. After converting lumps, excluding rainbow as usual, that allowed me to increase my elixir total to between 76 to 79 elixirs for a single stat. However, if I chose not to craft the elixirs but simply use the extra shards to barter for the 1, then the numbers change, but not by much. If I didn't craft and didn't convert, my range, depending on selling rainbow lumps or not, was between 74 to 76. If I did convert lumps, then it went up to between 75 to 77. So, not a terribly significant difference. Admittedly, that's several more elixirs you can get, but is this really efficient? Well, let's take a look at our results. Remember, we're trying to find out the most efficient way of getting elixirs based on the amount of resources we can gain in an hour. The Seabed run gives us 23 elixirs, which per minute is pretty low at 0.38 elixirs per minute. Our gold-only method, without converting the lumps, gives us 0.95 elixirs per minute, and after converting, we have 0.96 repeating per minute. With doing shards only, bartering with them, selling the rest, and then bartering our beast parts and basic ingredients, we saw we could hit 58 just doing that and nothing else, which was roughly the same as the best gold-only scenario, putting us back at 0.96 repeating. Bartering and converting gave us a little extra, putting us at 60 to 63 elixirs, which is between 1 and 1.05 per minute. However, if we craft elixirs and then sell the leftovers, that number puts us ahead. Without converting lumps, we see our per minute resource rate increase to between 1.08 and 1.12 elixirs per minute, and after converting lumps, it climbs again to 1.1 or 1.13 repeating. However, if we do our final scenario of maxing out our 4 basic categories and then bartering for stuff, that number drops. That's because we're not running 60-minute loops again for resources, but we've instead upped that number to 80 minutes. That's going to drop our average per minute down. If we craft but don't barter or convert, that range becomes 0.95 to 0.975 per minute, which is roughly where we were in our gold-only strategies. If we don't craft or barter but do convert our lumps, then that range rises to between 0.95 and 0.99 per minute. Choosing not to craft or convert, but bartering with shards and selling the rest puts us at 74 to 75 elixirs for a rate of 0.93 to 0.94 per minute, and not crafting but converting and bartering puts us at 75 to 77 elixirs for a rate of 0.94 to 0.96 per minute. This has been a lot more mental work than I thought it was going to be. So, where do we stand at the end here? Based on what I'm seeing here, and assuming my math is right, and I hope it is, because I'm not doing this again, the best method for getting strength and defense elixirs is to farm Faarlundheim using Hermit's Metal and Mason's Metal to convert all possible golden XP to crystal shards. Next, you'll want to convert all of your lumps into seastones and then craft either all strength or all luck elixirs to max out those stats. Again, check the stat caps I have listed earlier to help you gauge this. If you're about to cap both characters, craft only what you need of one and then craft another one you need. Once you've capped both strength and luck, crafting is no longer a viable option. In this case, you'll want to start buying them outright. Once again, the best course of action is to keep the same equipment and start raking in shards. I was routinely able to get up to about 1.5 to 1.6 million in about an hour. Again, part of this is how efficiently you go full Julie Andrews on these things. That said, it's not a hard benchmark to hit once you get the hang of it. Converting lumps to sea stones, bartering shards for elixirs, and then selling off everything should net you a pretty decent chunk, and once you get to be efficient, about 60 elixirs per run is pretty good. Keep in mind, you'll also likely be spending some time getting your release lines filled in with a bunch of +2 seeds, which is going to increase your stats even more. The last question is this. With stat caps, how hard are Nightmare and Inferno difficulties? Well, the only part I had a hard time with in the main game was some of these ship battles, even at full upgrades, because some of the ships become damage sponges, but they aren't too bad. Even then, the fake merchant ships were the only thing that took a while, but that's only because, again, damage sponge. There are spoilers for what I'm about to show you. My fight against the last boss on Inferno with max stats and full +2 nodes, with a few +3s as well that I had built up, but we're talking maybe only an additional 16 stat points total at best. Here's the fight in its entirety. I've even left in the moment where you see me change the difficulty to Inferno. Also, with things like luck maxed out, you're basically guaranteed to crit most of the time, and the bonuses from all the different nodes, such as HP restore effect and combined with damage mitigation, is to the point where it's almost impossible for you to lose. You know what? It's easier if I just show you. This is the full fight in its entirety, minus cutscenes.
Think that after a century, standing shoulder to shoulder like this. I'm sorry for what happened all that time ago, Lee.
We live together!
Brace yourselves!
Are you alright, Faarlund?
I'm managing to retain control of myself. Thanks to you. That alone, however, will not be enough to stop Rollo of the Bloody Sea. As expected, our only resort is for these two to prevail.
You see, we've got even more left to give. By us.
See how this treats you!
Go time, Karja! Take this! Take this! Slow escape!
Try this on for time!
A massive form of great sea! Crumble! I have reached!
There's nowhere to run!
It's from through! Is it over?
Well, I hope that answers your question. And I hope this has been enlightening and informative to you. I'm done with these 10 for now, and that gives me plenty of time to work on other video projects, which I'll be uploading at some point. In the meantime, you all take care, and I'll talk to you again later.